Let's head inside.
Box locks were prominent in houses up until the 1850s in American architecture before the mortise lock was invented in the late 1850s. Triple hung windows, pretty rare.
You gotta wonder why you would come to Galveston.
It was still pretty rough and mosquito ridden. You're like, why did I come here? Why Texas? The house has a complex web of information going on with it. Michel Menard was a slaveholder. Hi, can we help you?
Oh, I thought you were going to.
No, we're filming a podcast and a video cast.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Causing trouble. Today, driving on 33rd Street, it can be easy to pass up one of the oldest homes in Galveston. In between Avenue N and a half and Avenue O, we have the 1838 Menard Home. Welcome to Galveston Unscripted. Thank you to the video sponsor, The Daily News, Texas' oldest newspaper, bringing you the news since 1842. Support your local newspaper, The Daily News. Today, we're going to be exploring one of the oldest homes in Galveston, the 1838 Menard Home. The home was built by a man named Michel Menard. And one very interesting thing about this home is that it wasn't even originally constructed in Galveston. It was constructed in Maine, disassembled, shipped down to Galveston, and rebuilt on this lot right here. Michel Menard was born in 1805 in Canada, near Montreal, and got into fur trading when he was only 14. He ended up in Texas in 1829, when Texas was still a part of Mexico. Michel Menard got involved in Texas politics. Michel Menard even signed the Texas Declaration of Independence, which led to Texas becoming an independent republic. Michel Menard moved to Galveston after the Texas Revolution in 1836 and began developing plans to build a city on this little island. Michel Menard was one of the founders of the city of Galveston. This little building right here was the first office for the Galveston City Company, where you could come and purchase your own plot of land on Galveston Island. He knew many of the major Texas history figures that we know today, like Sam Houston, the Allen brothers who developed the city of Houston, and many, many others, and even invited them to this home once it was completed. Michel Menard lived in this house until his death in 1856, where his family occupied it until 1879. The house has had a couple different owners over the years, and today is owned and managed by the Galveston Historical Foundation, keeping the history of the founding of the city of Galveston alive. A huge thanks to the Galveston Historical Foundation and Denise Alexander for taking us through this home. So we're going to be going inside and taking a look at the 1838 Menard Home. The first Mardi Gras ever in Galveston was celebrated in this home. The home was built in Maine, disassembled, and shipped down to Galveston in the 1830s. Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Denise Alexander. I'm the Chief of Museums and Programs at the Galveston Historical Foundation.
Awesome, and we are going to be touring one of the oldest houses in Galveston, right?
It is the oldest house in Galveston. It was built in 1838 for a Frenchman named Michel Menard. It's not pronounced Michael, which sometimes people think.
We are on 33rd Street here. From what I've read, this home was built here because it was one of the highest points on the island, right?
Exactly. So this area of the island naturally occurring is on a high ridge. So at the time this house was built in the 1830s and some of the other ones around it, they were all built here, one, because it was away from downtown, didn't smell bad, there wasn't commerce and goods going on, but you could also have more land and it was naturally high. So there's a little bit of a ridge here, and even during Hurricane Ike, this did not flood at all.
Wow.
It's kind of a misconception. Some of the oldest houses in Galveston are in the surrounding neighborhoods here. The Williams house is built in 1839, this is 1838. But there are many houses on blocks over from here that are in the 1860s Greek Revival style that are pretty common for this neighborhood.
Beautiful. What
makes this house a little bit different than other houses in Galveston at this time is you can see that it has, fancy columns, has Doric columns on them, capitals, I think they're Doric, which is fairly unusual for Galveston at this time, and that's because this house was shipped from Maine and they used craftspeople in Maine who had a little bit more experience with wood carving. That would not have been what Galveston was like in 1838. They had no one here that could have cut wood like this. So the house is built on a Greek Revival style, which in the period of architecture in the United States, Greek Revival was what was the current fancy at the time. And so pretty unusual for an area like Galveston or in Texas in the 1830s. The craftsmanship here was a little bit more crude, as they like to call it in architecture books and things like that. So this was a bit of an anomaly. He was the founder of the city of Galveston. They drew the plat maps. So I think this was called like the out boundaries or something like that. And so the lots were bigger this way because this was considered the country.
Yeah, right? I can't imagine that.
Yeah, which now is so weird being that, downtown is just at 20th. I mean, we're at 33rd, so definitely. Like anything here in town in the 1830s, is there was no trees in Galveston at that time. So this house would have had direct breezes from the Gulf. And one of the reasons for the porches on it is so that you could have that breeze access, because it would have been a flat stretch between here and the Gulf, which is so much differently when you see these oak trees, which we believe these were planted around the same time that a lot of the other oak trees in Galveston were planted after the 1900 storm.
Let's head inside.
Welcome to the inside.
Wow.
Don't want me to go over my nerdy door lock history?
Yes, please. I love door lock history.
You've met the right person. So the doorknobs and the door hardware, of course, are not original, but they are of the period. So this is a box lock, and box locks were prominent in houses up until the 1850s in American architecture, before the mortise lock was invented in the late 1850s. So all the locks on the doors were box locks and have this, I think this is a Yale box lock, but they were producing locks in the 1830s. Wow. So this was kind of a standard type mechanism that was retrofitted a little bit here on this door, but would have been standard in houses in the 1830s. I did my thesis on box lock. Hi, can we help you?
Oh, I thought you guys were...
No, we're filming a podcast and a video cast. This house isn't open to the public.
Got it, thank you.
You're welcome.
We're causing trouble. We're causing trouble.
This house does have a side hall staircase, which is very common in houses of this time and in ones in Galveston. A thing to note about this place is that none of the furnishings, we'll just get that out right now, none of the furnishings in the house are original, and it wouldn't have had this kind of grand looking marble flooring. It would have had some more of a pine look to it, but the original layout of the house is the same as it was, basically, like I mentioned before.
So original layout, not original furniture.
No, not original furnishing. But the house is furnished with some antiques that were mostly purchased at auction in New Orleans and in Natchez in the mid-1990s, along with the light fixtures. So everything was picked out for the house by the owners of the house at the time. I would say fitting of the period, but maybe not the Galveston period. So.
Oh wow, those are giant doors.
Yeah, so these are these really, really wonderful bifold precursor to pocket doors. At that time, the house was built, they did not have the technology to have sliding pocket doors, just like the locks were always a box lock. They didn't have the way to put them into the walls. So these bifold doors and these two original little rosettes at the top are original to the house, which is kind of fun. These are almost like the closet door that everybody hates in their house.
Right?
You know,
yes,
you want to get rid of them, but
those.
we have the really, really, really big wooden version here inside the Menard house. His uncle was lieutenant governor in Illinois, and so helped him learn English, got into the fur trading business, which was also very common at that time, came down through Illinois to Nacogdoches.
Okay.
And then ended up in Galveston, which
wow.
now seems like it's like a 2.5 hour drive, but that would have been a close proximity at that point. And then got involved in business and fur trading, and apparently was pretty savvy enough to meet a lot of these other folks who were moving and shaking in early Texas history at that time. I was going to show you these photographs we can walk through here.
Okay.
Because they show what the house looked like.
Oh my gosh.
I do not know the story of that piece in the back, but apparently that was when the house was being redone, the Halloween cat and witch was found in the walls. Victorians and the second owners, you know, were all into the mystical and the fanciful, so it really wouldn't surprise me there'd be a Halloween cat. How GHF ended up with the house was that in the mid-90s, the house was purchased by GHF as part of its revolving fund. We bought the house, stabilized it, cleaning up. It was in horrible state of disrepair, and we've got some photos in these two rooms that show that. And that was what the revolving fund at the time did, was just stabilize and then resell. And then we sold the house to Mr. and Mrs. Burns, Pat and Fred, and then they turned it and bought all the antiques and then spent all the money to restore the house and to get it cleaned up and functioning. And then soon after that, the house was open for tours as a house museum about early Galveston history at Hurricane Ike. We didn't open it up after that. About 5 or 6 years ago, the house was donated back to GHF. So GHF now owns the house again.
Just trading it back and forth.
Trading it back and forth like the Allen brothers.
And it's crazy to think the first Mardi Gras party ever.
It was
here.
now, and people kind of think that's weird, but he was French. It's a French tradition. Yeah. A small gathering. Mardi Gras has religious background.
I mean, he brought Mardi Gras here, and
He
it's
did.
the third largest celebration in the U.S.
did,
now, right?
He did.
Wow. And look how much work was done to this house. Wow. And look at the property. It's like typical Galveston.
And these are all items that they found in the house that would have been, you know, some Civil War buttons, items from the kitchen pit. They did some archaeology on these pieces. These really, really wonderful nails, which I love finding.
Oh my gosh.
Nails and pieces. You can see they're hand done.
Yeah, the square head.
Yeah, square head. These big pieces, little toy soldiers from the yard, pieces like that.
Oh my goodness. Those are really cool. The slate roof and little hatchet.
The house was built with, you know, pretty much traditional building practices at that time. It was done with plaster and lath, which you can see a piece of upstairs. Some really basic, you can look at here, this mortise and tenon peg and square nail, where you're just putting pieces in to get them to work together. The house is really, really, really well built. That kind of feels super thick when you're in here, and that has not changed since the 1830s. One of the things about the house is that it was added onto a few times. When Michel Menard lived here, unfortunately, there wasn't like a yard full of children or anything. He was married 4 times. All of his wives died at different diseases, different times. But they did put an office on the south side of the property to make it so it could be the offices of the Galveston City Company. And you can see that right here, this was added on, and it has an exterior door to the outside. So this would have been the offices of the Galveston City Company. We have read that they did have a partner's desk here. It's not this partner's desk, but there was a partner's desk. And this is kind of a picture of the Galveston City Company, what a piece of property would have looked like when you would have purchased it, which was pretty cool though. So you'd have come here and you would have purchased your lot to own your little piece of paradise in this office for many, many years until they opened up a place downtown.
I didn't realize this was the city company office.
Yeah, this was it.
I mean, to think about how many people would have come in here to purchase their land.
I know, it's kind of storied.
Some of these books, I mean, they look super
Yeah,
old.
some of this stuff is really fun.
From the 1840s.
We moved most of the things that we have, of course, are in our collections facility. The Ketchum family, I think they were the second owners here, and they were here at the time of the 1900 storm. So he was the chief of police, I believe, and so kind of has another history with the 1900 storm. Of course, this area was not damaged by the 1900 storm. The debris line is much further to the east. There is some sort of record or story about them having funeral pyres here in the yard with the dead bodies. I'm not sure if that's a rumor or not.
There would have been plenty of land.
There would have been plenty of land, and it was a high area, and you had to do something with them. So between Michel Menard being the founder of the city of Galveston, having the first Mardi Gras here, him being a signer of the Texas Declaration of Independence, and then having this 1900 storm history, the house has a complex web of information going on with it. If you want to go back to the kitchen, it's pretty
Sure.
cool. Yeah, so this is the dining room. Traditionally would have always been the dining room, as access to another porch. These photos, people always ask, these are not the Menards. These were just they're just some people. Some actually pretty valuable portraits, but we do have the collection of Texian china here, which is some very important pieces dealing with early Texas history that are there. Different colors are rarer than others. I think the blue color is a little bit more rare. And they have scenes from the Texas Revolution on them. which a lot of other museums that deal with early Texas history have those in their collections. When we do have a hurricane here, those do evacuate. They do leave the island. And the kitchen, of course, at that time, like any house at this time, would have been in the back part of the property, but then later on it was attached.
Mm-hmm. Look at this kitchen.
Yeah, so the kitchen has more of what the original floors would have looked like in the house. Our historic Sub-Zero refrigerator. Of course, there were some additions made to the house to make it more livable for the modern, usable for the modern time. This would have been a separate building. It was then put on, things change. The stove in the back is original, and we use this place as our place to store things when we have our own parties here.
Love the stove.
Michel Menard was a slaveholder in the city of Galveston, just like the Browns were at Ashton Villa. Houses and people in Galveston did not have or own that many slaves at the time because we didn't have land, you weren't farming as much, but they did have house servants and house slaves that they did barter for and pay for. So the house does have a history of having slaves that have lived here. And through the course of time, we've had some of those African-American family members have come back and their last name is Menard to visit the house and to see the house. They'll have their family reunion and they've stopped by a couple times, some of the ancestors of some of their enslaved forefathers and foremothers who did live in the house and work here while Michel Menard was here. And we do have that schedule of some of those folks that were here and have done a little bit more research on those to try to find those folks so that we can honor them and their time here.
Wow.
Just like we've done at Ashton Villa.
Very important piece of the story.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to see upstairs?
Yes, please.
All
That'd be
right.
awesome.
Come on.
And you were telling us earlier, Michel Menard was one of the signers of the Texas Declaration of Independence, right?
Yes, he was. So he had relationships with all types of, early Texas history greats. Sam Houston was one of them who was rumored to have stayed in this house. Thomas McKinney of the Liberty McKinney House that's over in the East End. He was a partner. And so a lot of those folks, they all knew each other because there wasn't a whole lot to know. And the Allen brothers from the city of Houston, this house traded hands with the Allen brothers in some nefarious games of poker, gambling of some sort a couple times. But they founded the city of Galveston, and most of those records are still kept at Stuart Title. Still has all the records from the Galveston City Company, because the Galveston City Company became Stuart Title.
That is fascinating. Yeah, one of the largest title companies in the U.S. now, still.
They still have a lot of that early information there, which we've been able to go through, scan a lot of those documents for use for history and research for the Menard House.
Let's do it.
So this is the room that we call the Sam Houston room. That's why we have a photo of Sam Houston above the bed. He is rumored to have spent the night here, so we call it the Sam Houston room.
Yeah, because he was in Galveston quite a few times.
Quite a bit. So we do use the house as a guest house of sorts for GHF guests, and people like to stay in the Sam Houston room.
Right.
It is the biggest room. Now, what is unusual is that this is the largest of the bedrooms. But Michel Menard's room would have been the front bedroom because it would have had more breeze.
Because you need that Gulf breeze.
Breeze is everything. And this is the sleeping porch, which would have been something very common at that time as well, to have a sleeping porch where you could open up the windows. You just really go there to sleep.
It's necessary.
It is necessary.
Gotta have that breeze.
So up here, this is configured with 3 bedrooms and 3 baths. We call this one the blue bedroom, with all these lovely antiques with canopy beds on it, which was also very common at the time. And this bedroom adjoins into what would have been Michel Menard's room. So the windows here are super interesting. They are triple hung. So this is what I meant by these are triple hung. 6/6 triple hung windows is that. So you can see there's one sash here, another one down here. So these will pull all the way up, and then this one pulls up, and then they all go up, and so then you can kind of get out, and they're called walkout windows for that purpose. So that you can, or
and
this one also can come down. It just depends on how you want to maneuver.
Yeah. That's really cool. You would imagine back then, in the 1830s, 1840s, you would hear everything.
Exactly. It would have been so quiet. There wouldn't have been the sounds of air conditioning and cars and all that kind of stuff. And then they just stick back in for closure with pins. triple hung windows, pretty rare.
Yeah,
Pretty rare.
I don't think I've ever seen triple
Yeah,
hung
we don't
windows
even have
before.
those at Bishop's Palace. So this is kept here to
Oh,
show
wow.
what the original construction as kind of a teaching tool and how plaster and lath works. So this is your background with some of the fun original nails into it. Then you take the plaster material and you build it up in multiple layers to get your plaster.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's pretty thick. Usually at a house that gets plastered, we've just done some replastering work at Ashton Villa, it's nowhere near this thick, but you would do a base coat, you let it dry, then you keep building it up till you kind of get this soft sand, and then you can paint on top of that.
And do you know if this would have been shipped in from Maine as well, or were they
I think
relied
they
on?
pretty much shipped all of the materials here. Most houses in Galveston, like at Bishop's Palace, for example, use a lot of East Texas wood because they could have gotten that here on the railroad pretty easily. But this may be a little bit different variety. It's solid though.
It
whatever
is, yeah.
It's like pushing on it, and then once you put this plaster on it, it's basically impenetrable.
Man, that is awesome. And it's really cool to think about constructing it in Maine or assembling it in Maine and shipping it down here. And I always wondered how much of the materials were actually put together up there and then shipped down. If they
It's
just
like a
completely
kit
constructed
house,
it.
like a modern day Sears bungalow kit house.
Yeah.
Pretty common. You know, a lot of the roof from Bishop's Palace was shipped on a schooner. It was just something that they did. And I think people always should remember that Galveston was a port town before it was a beach town. So the port was where everything spun around, everything revolved around downtown and not the beach. So having that access into this port made offloading of all building materials much easier because Texas was not an industrialized place in the 1830s and 1840s. Didn't have any type of industrial type work, no metal foundries, none of that. It was a barren, mosquito-filled place where people ate hardtack and oysters.
You gotta wonder why you would come to Galveston.
Those accounts of early Galveston history just paint it as so bleak.
Yes.
Oysters were plentiful. They all carried like a Bowie knife, you know, to stab animals or whatever for food, pig roast.
No trees.
No trees, mosquito-ridden. And especially when you read some of the things about immigrants coming into Galveston for the first time, and much later on, 1860s, 70s, well not really 1860s because of the Civil War, but post 70s and 80s, it was still pretty rough and mosquito-ridden. You're like, why did I come here? Why Texas? You know, why would I do this? But this is a fun shot off the back.
Back in 1838, without the homes and without these trees, as Galveston was pretty barren, you would have had a great view of the Gulf of Mexico.
Over there. Oh, God.
Anything cool in the attic?
Hot.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the tour today. It was awesome.
Hey, you're welcome. Come back anytime. Hopefully this video can show off more of the house a lot of people don't normally get to see.
Absolutely. And can you tell us a little bit about the book you have out now?
So I wrote a book many years ago on Galveston's downtown and Strand district, on the history of some of the buildings on the Strand, focused more on architecture. And then hopefully soon we'll have one on Bishop's Palace.
I'm going to put a link in the description to your book.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Denise. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and share it. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. We are everywhere. Go check us out. And again, a special thank you to Denise Alexander and Galveston Historical Foundation for allowing us to go into the Menard Home and take a look around. I really appreciate it. And go check out the podcast. We have tons and tons of audio content on that podcast feed. You can find the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for walking with me, and we'll see you next time on Galveston Unscripted.